Welcome to WBC Faster Together, the LinkedIn Live series of Women Business Collaborative. I'm Gwen Young, CEO of WBC. WBC is an unprecedented alliance of over 80 women business organizations and hundreds of business leaders building a movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability, we are mobilizing thousands to create momentum and accelerate the pace of change. We live our commitment to DEI, and members of our leadership, staff, and board of directors and our WBC champions include more than 35% people of color. Every one of our action initiatives also has DEI goals for 2025 and 2030. So please check the chat for our action initiatives through which we aim to accelerate change, drive impact, and join our movement at wbcollaborative.org. Each week in this series, we offer different ways to advocate change and accelerate impact by presenting data, research, and best practices, by lifting up the power of women's voices for change, and by showcasing leaders committed to allyship, inclusivity, and driving corporate purpose. So today in 2024, we are at a critical inflection point as women begin to take higher levels of financial household management and elevate their financial acumen. According to a report from UBS in 2023, women are contributing to their combined household incomes more than ever, but are still relinquishing their power over financial decision-making. And so as we see more women playing a deeper role in contributing to household income, it's critical to explore the factors at play as more women seek to build wealth that will elevate their decision-making and leadership. At WBC, we're committed to supporting the building women-owned businesses and ensuring more women control capital, invest, and participate in wealth management. So I'm delighted today to introduce you to our speaker, Nicole Herman, who's a relationships manager for the women's segment leadership with UBS. WBC is lucky to have UBS as a critical partner in our work to achieve equal position, pay, and power. And together we are engaging women-owned businesses and women investors. So this conversation today is part of our ongoing dialogue on how to grow wealth for all women in business. So Nicole, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us from Southern California.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
As well, so let's kick it off. As we said, you've done extensive research at UBS for many years to better understand how women and how they approach their financial decisions. Can you tell us a little bit more about this research, but also from your vantage point, what trends have you noticed over the past few years with women in finance and women in business?
Sure. No, I appreciate the question. And I think I'll first start by saying that the women's segment at UBS is focused on the development and implementation of UBS's strategy to address the unique financial needs of women throughout the course of their lifetimes. And I think our efforts are really threefold. One, to help bring more women to the financial table, as we like to call it. Two, to support the women who are already at that table. And three, to make that table a more inclusive place for all women investors. And we didn't ever want to make any assumptions about what women need financially or about what's most important to them, which is why we ultimately decided to conduct and do our own extensive research. And we've spoken with thousands and thousands of women and men from all different backgrounds, financial situations, ages, marital status, race and ethnicity, sexual orientation. We've really, tried to speak to as many people as we can to better hear and learn directly from them. So as we began this journey, we actually came across a pretty staggering statistic from the US Census Department that 8 out of 10 women were going to end up alone and solely responsible for their financial well-being at some point in their lifetime. And this is due to a variety of factors, including the fact that women tend to live longer than men. Divorce rates are still around 50%, and the rates of marriage are also decreasing. So in 2018, we embarked on our own first body of research called Own Your Worth. And we found that almost 60% of women in traditional heterosexual couples and 40% of women in same-sex couples defer or don't participate or abdicate the major financial decisions that impact them in their future. So think about that. That's a lot. And so for our team, that was an important realization for us, and we knew where we wanted to begin this journey. And so for the last 6 years, we've continued to publish new research and explore lots of topics around this idea and the dynamics in more detail that, better understands women in their financial decision making and also increase the level of financial participation among women, while also understanding those needs more deeply. So the good news is, and what we've learned, over the last few years, is that there is a huge opportunity for women in their wealth. Women control and are on track to control more wealth in the US and globally than ever before, which is frankly overdue. But in 2020, women controlled $11 trillion in wealth in the US, and they're on track to control 30 trillion by 2030. So there's so many ways for women to put their money towards the causes most important to them, and we're optimistic about the runway for women in their wealth. And what's important is that women participate in the important financial decisions to make their money work just as hard for them as they are for it.
So I know you said you started some of this work in 2018 in sort of the formal report. Has anything sort of changed over the past couple of years, that something you saw 2018, 2019? Because everyone always sort of pre-COVID, post-COVID, where the economy is. Has anything really changed that stands out to you?
So the good news is we've improved the dynamic slightly. When we started this research, about 56% of women were abdicating. Now we're still around the 50% mark. So there's still a lot of work to do, but at least there's progress moving in the right direction. And while we started with this topic of women and abdication and deferring and sort of maybe the darker side of the conversation, we've wanted to learn a little bit more too. So we've explored the role of men in the equation. We have looked at the role of how the pandemic has impacted women. We, again, to not make any assumptions, we had an idea, but what we learned was that there was a disproportionate impact of the pandemic on women. We actually used the pandemic to kind of transfer our focus to understand how women wanted to lead more intentional and purposeful lives. Investing goes beyond just ringing the cash register for women. Women want to put their money towards the causes most important to them. And most recently in 2023, we actually looked at some of the behaviors and trends for women breadwinners. And we learned that about 1/3 of women are the breadwinners in their relationships. But unfortunately, we still see that trend of abdication taking place. And while women in relationships who earn more than their male counterparts, they're leaving those important financial decisions to their male partners. So we've seen a lot happening.
Yeah, I know there's a lot. Well, and the other thing I wanted to bring in too is, I know we talked about this a little bit, a lot of this is tied to sort of the balanced life, like whether you say you're a women executive or, coming out of COVID and how you want to live a purposeful life, a balanced life. Can you talk about, kind of how that's linked? What does that look like? And, how does that help you achieve your financial goals?
It's a great question. And I think that's what's really important. And you heard me start the conversation by saying that, our goal is to really encourage more women to take their seat at the money table, as we like to call it, and to help women achieve that greater financial and hopefully overall well-being. And our team really believes that financial well-being and overall well-being are inextricably linked. And we also believe that increasing the level of women's financial well-being and financial engagement will also help close the wealth gap. And beyond that, it's really important in terms of balance for us to meet women where they are in their financial journey. It's a deeply personal process. And so our team is really focused on helping address what's most important to women financially and how they can plan to achieve those goals. And it's really the foundation of everything we do. Our core belief is that women are a population, not a segment. We always say it's a little bit silly to call 51%, almost 52% of the population a segment. No two women, no two investors are alike. We all have different goals, different things that keep us up at night, different personal stories, and maybe family histories around money and relationships with money. So to your original question around living a more balanced life, we feel it's important to approach the topic of financial well-being in this way, but we definitely see financial well-being as being a critical element of overall well-being.
That's incredibly important. It plays in quite a bit, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I want to switch a little bit to part of your work with the women's segment. UBS, and you are advising many women-owned businesses as they build their companies, right? So what are some of the opportunities, or maybe some of the challenge, right, for women entrepreneurs and as women are building their businesses?
Sure. And I think I'll start with the challenges. So we certainly see a lot of challenges that tend to impact women business owners. And at UBS, we're really committed to trying to mitigate and solve for those. Research has shown that there's significant unconscious bias that exists in the room and in the conversations around capital. So, for example, investors tend to ask male founders how their companies will succeed and about their growth opportunities, but from a for female founders, those investors tend to ask them how they plan to manage risks and avoid failure. So there's that unconscious bias that tends to shine, which is a huge challenge. And another challenge is around the lack of access to established networks. So investors often base funding decisions on shared backgrounds, maybe such as education or similar work experiences. And while women tend to have more advanced degrees or credentials, accessing venture capital remains a challenge for them, as we all know. And since only about 2% of venture funding goes to women founders and even less goes to women of color founders, that's something that really continues to resonate. But in terms of potentially an opportunity for every owner, we talk a lot about maximizing the tax efficiency and net proceeds from monetization event to do the pre-sale planning ahead of time. So 34% of owners of both genders have not put structures in place to help maximize taxes and shield proceeds. And according to our own Own Your Worth research, which we started our conversation with, only about 48% of women primary earners reported that they handle the financial planning. So there's still kind of a lot of work to be done there. But for business owners who are potentially nearing an exit, a focus on creating that financial plan would be really beneficial, and understanding what their number is and what essentially means what they need post-tax to fund their long and short-term goals. Really important. So while there are these barriers that exist, we also see women especially owning their worth and thriving. And I know we talked about this huge opportunity for women and their wealth, but 42% of US businesses are owned by women, which is a significant amount, and we continue to see that grow every year. So it's pretty incredible. And we also talk a lot about the exit strategy, and we know that 100% of owners will eventually exit their business, and it's important that they recognize their goals and make sure that those are defined, especially for a potential buyer. So I think when it comes to UBS and how we support women business owners and founders, we really want to make sure that the exit plan is clear. So we ask, what are your options? What are you thinking? Are you thinking about going the private equity route, acquisition? Are you interested in passing a business to a family or selling it to your employees? And then we also help women navigate not just the exit, but the post-exit financial planning needs. What does life after the exit look like? You're spending so much time focusing on the now. You need to think a little bit more about the future, and what are those goals, and how will you find that purpose beyond the company once that's no longer part of the day-to-day. And then, of course, we incorporate the research from our women's segment and everything I've kind of highlighted so far through our Own Your Worth research.
Well, and it's that thing about sort of making the financial decisions not just in the workplace, but in your household, or in the blurring the lines, right? So you don't act one way in one place and one way in another, which I love.
Yeah.
You touched a bit on networks, and one of the things we're doing together with Women, so Women Business Collaborative is a network, we are an alliance, but one of the things we're doing together is putting together these kind of cocktail conversations where we're trying to bring women together to have these discussions. How important are these networks, and what are you seeing, and how can we build that same kind of network and support?
They're everything. So I really appreciate this question, because I think the networking and relationships are really at the heart of everything we do. And we're so thrilled to have this national partnership with WBC and to see our two organizations' missions be so naturally aligned. And through all of the engagements that we've done together, we have this opportunity to share what both firms are focusing on and how we can tap into the vast resources available. But in terms of what those meaningful connections do, we find that building and fostering that sense of community is so important. And I think that's the key piece here is community. And every day our team at UBS strives to help foster and build that sense of community, whether it's locally or nationally. It's just having a safe space to share ideas, ask questions and learn from one another is truly invaluable, and creating those opportunities like the conversation we're having today to start those conversations is really important. And there's just something so special about bringing like-minded women together, especially, and the strength that offers. So I'd say community is really an important aspect in the progress and learning from one another.
And more so, I mean, we are so honored to be doing it with you and with our radio partners, other corporate sponsors. And what's great is bringing everybody in that room and having that conversation. And we did our Capital Summit, our first ever last September. We'll do our next one this September. And to your point, we talked about from your first needs to capital all the way up to exiting your business, that whole growth cycle. And being in the room together, being able to talk about that, learning from experiences, sharing is so incredibly important. So we always love at WBC to leave our conversations with, like, what is the call to action, right? What do you want to say to an individual or organization, institutions? What do you want to leave our audience with today?
Sure. I think that's a great question. A few things come to mind. So the first is really to just talk about money with the women in your life. We need to work to break down this taboo around talking about money. People think, it's not ladylike, or that, there's just this stigma and taboo that continues to kind of hover around this conversation. And, it's really important to share talk with your friends, talk with your family, talk with your colleagues, any of the women in your life, and really work to break that taboo down and have the important conversations. Because to our, your last question, there's so much that we can learn from one another and, make it easier. I think in a lot of ways, when you're thinking about, the trusted people in your life, who you're working with on the finances is another important thing. And, I'd encourage anybody listening today to assess where they are in their financial journey. And if you're already working with a trusted partner, take the time to make sure that they're really helping you every step of the way. And if it's maybe something that you're not already doing, I'd encourage anyone to start that conversation with an expert at somewhere like UBS to help plan for the future, because it's really about thinking about, not just what you need right now, but for the future, and how to achieve those important goals. And it deserves the time, and it deserves the conversation. And then, from our team, for anyone who's interested in maybe learning more about Own Your Worth, our research, some of the content or resources available, to just maybe explore some of these things on your own. Our external website's available at ubs.com/women. And it's really the content hub for everything that we've been talking about today.
I love that. Take the time in the conversation. So I'm so glad that we could have this conversation today. We are unfortunately out of time, but I'm so glad we had this. So we invite you to wb.collaborative.org to learn more about WBC's initiatives to increase women in the C-suite and boardroom, to address the underrepresentation of women in STEM and the available capital for women, and to advance in a pipeline of women leaders that are going to bring gender, pay equity, diversity, equity, inclusion to the business landscape. And join us to hear more about what UBS and WBC are doing together to both build that network and create that conversation space. Join us weekly to keep up to date on our next guest on our progress on the movement for gender equity in business and the latest issues by following us on WB Collaborative on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Have a wonderful Thursday and stay